Hello, everyone. How are you? How are we? How am I? I don't know. It's the great mystery of the universe, right? Anyway. Anyway, I'm here today to talk about a visual novel that I recently finished playing/reading. Not really sure of the terminology, but I think it's reading because it's a visual novel. I don't fucking know. Okay, whatever. I finished reading this visual novel called Hashihime of the Old Book Town, and I wanted to talk about it because I had some thoughts. I wanted to give my thoughts, do a little review, whatever. So to be clear, Hashihime of the Old Book Town is probably like my first real visual novel. I read like Hatto Full Boyfriend or whatever the fuck that bird game is years ago, right? I have no recollection of how I accessed that game, no recollection of where I played it, how I played it, when I played it, how long I played it for. I barely remember playing it, right? I only know that I did play it, so I would not really consider that part of my history. Hashihime of the Old Book Town is going to take the title as like the first visual novel that I've ever played, so yeah. I want to preface this by saying that I will be spoiling some parts of the story of Hashihime, so if you really want to play it or read it, whatever, I would recommend, clicking off this video, going, playing it, having fun. It's a really, I think, a very worthwhile experience. However, I will also say, no matter what I say, no matter what I spoil, nothing will be as effective as actually playing or reading the visual novel, right? It's not, like what I say, it's not going to compare at all. So even if I do spoil something for you, I highly recommend you go and actually play/read it, because it's very worthwhile. Hashihime of the Old Book Town is a BLVN, which is a boys love visual novel, and it takes place in Taisho era Japan, which is like the 1920s-ish. Specifically, it takes place in 1922 in the like district of Jinbutsu, which is part of the prefecture of Tokyo, or like something like that, right? So the general plot of Hashihime of the Old Book Town is our main character, his name is Tamamori. He is 20 years old, so he is a grown man, okay? He's very old. We should kill him. We should beat him to death with sticks. I don't know what that was. Anyway, Tamamori came to Jinbutsu 2 years prior to the start of the game with his childhood friends Minakami and Kawase in hopes of getting into the Imperial University in Tokyo. He failed. He does not make it, which makes him a Ronensei, so he is studying to retake that entrance exam to get into the university. Studying being a loose term here, he's not actually studying, he's spending all his time writing stories because he is an aspiring writer. He loves to write these beautiful fantasy stories and then sharing them with his friends. So he's doing that instead of studying. He also works in a used bookstore in Jinbutsu called Umebachido. At Umebachido, there is this mysterious shopkeeper who we don't really know the identity of until later in the game. And, the shopkeeper takes care of Tamamori. And then there is a character called the Professor, who is a regular at Umebachido. There's also Hanazawa, who's an estranged childhood friend of Tamamori's. The final, really main character is the Phantom of Jinbutsu, who is this big hulking figure who Tamamori thinks is chasing him around. As the game progresses, Tamamori realizes that he is repeating the same 3 days over and over again, and part of the mystery is figuring out why that's happening. And on top of that, each loop his friends are dying, so his goal is to also figure out why that is happening and potentially stop it. Aside from all that, Tamamori also hallucinates a lot, so there is sometimes a question of what is real and what is fake, but through most of the routes, what is real and what is fake is made pretty obvious. Specifically, Tamamori hallucinates these two characters called Mr. Frog and Haruhiko-san, and they are kind of his guiding spirits as he, repeats these 3 days over and over again. So, with all that being said, let's talk about some of these fucking characters, right? We'll start with Tamamori, right? Tamamori is the protagonist here, and I think he is a very successful protagonist. He is very effective. He is very, very prideful and very convinced of his greatness, but at the same time, he constantly needs reassurance from outside figures to tell him that he's great, to feed into his pride. And the one who does that the most is probably Minakami, because every time he shares a story with Minakami, Minakami is like, Tamamori, this is great. This is such a good story. You're doing so good. This is amazing. I love it, blah, 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 whatever. And then his friend Kawase is just a hater. And so every time that Kawase is like, your story fucking sucks, Tamamori likes going to Minakami and being like, what do you think, Minakami? So I really like Tamamori. I think he's a great protagonist. He's a great main character. I think he is quite silly, quite funny, quite interesting. He also wears glasses, which I really like, or he wears glasses for the first fucking loop, and then through the rest of the fucking game, he doesn't wear the damn glasses, which is okay, great. I don't know why that always happens where a character is introduced with glasses and then somewhere in the story they just take them off and they never get put back on. It's like, these glasses were never real to begin with. Or like, you're prettier without the glasses. As a glasses wearer myself, I want you to shut the fuck up. I thought Tamamori was really cute with the glasses. I thought he was a sweet little thing, okay? And you're like, no. Kill yourself. Moving on from there, I kind of want to talk about all the routes, because as a BLVN, it kind of acts like an otome game where like you'd go down different routes to end up with all the different main characters. And you also, as you are going down these different routes, you are learning more about the story. The route order in this game is locked, so you have to go in a very specific order. And the first one that you start with is Minakami. Minakami's route is, I would probably say, like the truest route, the one that is like the most canon, you know, whatever the fuck, I don't fucking know. His route is also the longest. It took me like 12 to 13 hours to complete. I really love Minakami. Minakami is kind of this like, he's the gentle archetype in this game. He's very sweet. He's very dedicated to Tamamori. You just know that he fucking smells good, right? He probably smells like fucking bamboo and like, I don't know, musk, whatever the fuck, I don't know. And he's also a very important character because he is basically the entire reason why Tamamori keeps going back in time. So the thing about Minakami is that every time loop, Minakami dies. And initially Tamamori thinks that he's being killed specifically by the Phantom of Jinbutsu, but later he learns that Minakami is actually killing himself. And the reason why he's killing himself is because Minakami is receiving the end of a manuscript that Tamamori has written from a future version of Tamamori, right? And then reading it and being like, well, I've finished the story, I have nothing else to read. This is like a stopping point for me, I'm gonna kill myself. So that's why he kills himself. As the story progresses in his route, you learn that the reason why future Tamamori is giving Minakami like the end to this one manuscript is because like there's a really bad future that happens like after World War II where like Japan gets all fucked up, and like he thinks that he can prevent the future by like doing this with Minakami, and also he fell in love with Minakami and he needs to prove to our Tamamori, present Tamamori, that he is also in love with Minakami. So like he's repeating all this time and like slowly learning that he loves Minakami, blah blah blah, whatever. And like the whole point is that they like get together in the end. Minakami's route is definitely like the most romantic, I would say. I mean, like it's kind of suggested that like Minakami's your one true love, like Tamamori, you gotta go down this route, which is another reason why I think it is like the truest route. Not that I need to like prove anything's the truest route. The truest route can be whatever is the truest in your heart. Okay? But anyway, I love Minakami's route. The one thing that I will say about Minakami is that there's this really inexplicable thing that happens that I think is never really expanded upon and never really explained. In one route, Tamamori like kind of captures Minakami to like stop him from killing himself. And Tamamori is like, oh, I'm capturing you because for inspiration, obviously, not to like I don't know, stop you from killing yourself or anything. And then they let Minakami go. Minakami runs away, and Tamamori catches up to him, and Minakami's like, actually, I lied. I fucking hate your stories. I've never liked your stories. They're fucking trash, goop shit. And this is said like only in this route. In later routes, Tamamori's like fucked up over it. He's like upset, obviously. Because, you know, the guy who has been complimenting him this whole fucking time is suddenly not doing that anymore. Hello? Is saying that he actually has hated his stories this whole fucking time. But Minakami never expands on it, right? Tamamori never brings it back up to Minakami, really. And Minakami never like says anything that's like substantially like, yes, that was true. I don't really know what that was. I don't know if that's the truth, but when I read it, I was like, oh my god, and I thought that was gonna be like a huge plot point for the rest of the story, but it really was not. It never really came back up. It was a big moment for Tamamori and for his pride, but ultimately it wasn't a big moment for him and Minakami in the grand scheme of things. Another quick thing that I will say about Minakami's route is that it is, because it's the longest and because it's like the main route, it reveals a lot of the story's hand very early on, which makes subsequent routes feel inferior and kind of tedious to play through, and maybe kind of repetitive as well. Especially with Kawase and Hanazawa's route. You get to see Kawase and Hanazawa a fair amount in Minakami's route, so you know basically all the background of Kawase, you know basically all the background of Hanazawa, you don't really learn anything super new about them in their routes. Anyway, I fucking love Minakami, he is my favorite, I love him. I love gentlemen, so that's me and Minakami, bro. Let's talk about the next route, okay? The next route is Kawase's route. Again, the root order is locked, so you do have to play Kawase second. Kawase is like this germaphobe, anti-touch, kind of like grumpy tsundere character. His route is definitely shorter than Minakami's. Apart from all the time that you have to replay to get to the option to play his route, it takes like maybe 5 hours. There's 5 hours of additional content to play for him or to read with him. And I will be a dissenting opinion here. I don't love Kawase. I don't love Kawase. I think it was pretty clear with how I talked about Minakami, but I'm a very big fan of like gentle guys. I like nice people. I like guys who are like silly and fun. I'm not a huge fan of like this like grumpy, kind of mean archetype, right? Like, just not for me. His route, again, definitely feels more lackluster because we learn a lot about him in Minakami's route. We know that he's like, you know, Tamamori's childhood friend, and we know a lot about his personality. You don't learn that much more about him, really. I mean, you do learn some things. You learn about like his experience in Jinbutsu because when he got to Jinbutsu, he was taken in by this old rich guy named Akita. And we learn in Minakami's route that he actually killed Akita, right? Which, not great. But then in his route that is expanded upon, we learn more about that. And that's really the big thing with his route, is that we learn about like his past with Akita, because Akita was actually abusing him and like sexually abusing him. The other big thing about his route is that it really instills this idea that Minakami's route is kind of like the best route, because future Tamamori keeps like coming back and trying to kill Kawase and like being like, you're going down the wrong path, Tamamori, go to Minakami, like blah blah blah, you're doing the wrong thing. And it's kind of tragic, but they do end up together, right? Like, this is ultimately Kawase's route. His route, I just think, is very much not based in Kawase himself. It's really based around things happening around him. Like, Minakami's route was definitely about Minakami, right? You learn about Minakami, about why he's killing himself, like what his motivations and ambitions are. With Kawase, you don't get that. And I just feel it makes for a weaker story. You do learn some things about his character. The big thing is that, like, he's like, Tamamori, actually, I know that I said I'm anti-touch, but you're the only one who can touch me, which is like, if you have any background in this kind of like character archetype, you could have seen that coming probably from a million fucking miles away, right? Like, that's probably clear as day. I will also say that Kawase's route, I find his ambitions and his goals very like inexplicable. I don't really understand them. But I will also say that that might be a fault on my part, because as somebody who does not really like this archetype of character, I probably cared less about this route. I was probably paying less attention, honestly. Part of it might be that I really never made the effort to understand him. I'm not saying that I hate Kawase, right? He was fine. I thought his route was fine. It didn't really stick out to me. I thought it was kind of boring. Sorry. Let's move on again. Hanazawa's route is next. I fucking hate Hanazawa. Hanazawa is another character that I really don't care for the archetype of. He's like the strong, serious guy. Doesn't show much emotion. He also wears glasses, but like sometimes takes them off. I don't know. That's whatever. His route is very, very short. It's like 3-ish hours maybe. But I was also rushing a little bit because I did not like his route. I do not like him. We learn basically everything that we need to know about Hanazawa in Minakami's route. We know all of his ambitions. We know all of his goals. We understand like what he is doing and why he is doing it. His whole thing is that he wants the power of the Hashihime to save Japan. He heard this prediction from a different like Hashihime owner, user, that like Japan was going to have this huge catastrophe in a couple years, and he was hoping to help stop it with the power of the Hashihime. So he like uses Tamamori to get the power of the Hashihime. So he's kind of like the evil one. He's like the worst end, probably. He does end up raping Tamamori, right? Which I did not like, because I really liked Tamamori. I didn't want to see him go through that, so I was definitely not paying much attention during that scene. But I will say, they describe his wiener as having reddish-black veins, which is like, does he have some illness? That's gotta be like an STI, right? That can't... Guys, that can't be right. That can't be right. He's just not to my taste. He's a little bitch, and I think the way that the story ends is out of character for Tamamori, because he like goes way, way, way back in time with Hanazawa, like 10,000 years back in time, so that he and Hanazawa can live alone, like in the prehistoric world. And they do this by using really old water, to be clear, because again, like, you go back in time to the time when the puddle was formed, or whatever. But 10,000 years is not that long. all things considered, like, they could meet some Neanderthals, which is kind of cool. Anyway, they be chilling 10,000 years in the past, and Tamamori basically just forgives him and is like, we're gonna live in the past together, which is weird. I don't really understand it. I don't get it. I don't want to get it. Okay, we're moving on. The next route is Professor's route. I love Professor. I think he is such a cutie. I did not like him in the beginning, but I think ultimately he is like he's such a sweet guy. It's very clear from the beginning that he is very interested in Tamamori, and you could probably pick up on the fact that he loves Tamamori pretty early on. He's very shy. He's definitely like the cutie patootie, like shy one. He's very submissive. He's got masochistic tendencies, which suits Tamamori very well. I also think his route is really good because Professor is probably the one that we learned the least about in Minakami's route. He shows up the least, so we know the least about him. We know a little bit. We know that he's like an inventor. He's very smart. He lives in a very big mansion with 2 maids, but we don't really know his story. We don't know his past, which is good because it makes the route more interesting, because then you read through it and it's like, wow. It is a little bit sad. He also kind of has the power of the Hashihime. He has it in like one of his eyes, but not the other. So he actually goes back in time with Tamamori like over and over again. What makes his route particularly sad is because you get to see the same professor over and over again through all these different time loops. And he's helping Tamamori, and they're like working together, collaborating, you know, becoming friends. And like the final time loop they go through together, Minakami dies, Kawase dies, both of Professor's maids die. He goes blind. Okay, so both of his helpers have died, and he's blind. And he's like, Tamamori, don't leave, blah, 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 whatever. And Tamamori's like, I'm gonna go back in time and save you as a child from myself, from my future self, who came back to like, I don't know, do XYZ to you. Nothing weird. Like, Tamamori's future self tells him like this fuck-ass story about like the Phantom of Jinbuchu, and Tamamori, I guess, goes back in time being like, I'm gonna stop that from happening. So he goes back 20 years to when Professor was a child, before he got told that story, and he like snatches Professor off the ground and like blah blah whatever. And it gets very sci-fi-ish. Tamamori tries to kill himself, but then he's saved by an alternate future version of Professor who is very happy and very successful and has the power to time travel, not through a Hashihime, but through like a big ass flying machine. And he's like, you're a successful writer, so I have to like save you from dying because we need your books, or like something. So he takes him back and he's like, I'm gonna send you back to your timeline. But Tamamori does not go back to his timeline. Tamamori goes to a new timeline where he and the professor have been living together for like a year or something. And he's kind of like abusing his power against the professor because the professor is like very much into him and wants to do whatever he can for him. So they have like an agreement where it's like, we can sleep in the same bed as long as you make me breakfast every morning, which is not like the worst deal in the world, but it's also like Professor does not get that much out of it, and Tamamori gets a fucking breakfast. But I guess whatever makes Professor happy, right? I like their ending. I do. I think there is like a sad part though, because it's understood throughout the game that every like loop that he does, that timeline still continues to exist even after he leaves. That's so sad that you left a fucking blind professor with no fucking friends. I love Professor. I liked his route. Very cute, very fun. Let's move on to the last route, which is like the secret route, but it's not really secret. If you understand anything about tropes at all, you'll understand that the final route is going to be the Phantom of Jinbuchu. The Phantom of Jinbuchu is named Kaoru, and his route is definitely the shortest. It's like 1, maybe 2 hours. Maybe, and that's stretching it. It's very, very short. I love Kaoru. I don't like how I'm saying that, Kaoru. I'm just gonna say it the American way. Sorry, guys. Kaoru. I love Kaoru because he is a cutie patootie. He's very traumatized and quiet, and like, this whole time he's been like killing fucking people for some reason. The Phantom of Jinbuchu's whole thing is that he was raised by future Tamamori because he was a child in the future, like during World War II when Japan gets fucking bombed, and future Tamamori saves him and like raises him, but also is like kind of abusive because future Tamamori doesn't like children. His route makes it kind of unclear what's going on. The whole thing about his route is that apparently basically everything that has happened so far is a fucking hallucination. Kawase, Minakami, Hanazawa are all dead. They died when they were children. And then Professor was like a customer that came in once that Tamamori thought was interesting and decided to hallucinate him as a friend. Apparently was just hallucinating them all as friends this whole time. But it's unclear to me if that's supposed to be like for the whole game or like just that one section, or if this is like the true ending. I really hope it's not. I mean, I get it and it makes sense, but it's also like kind of a cop-out because it's kind of like, it was all a dream. I just don't like this kind of ending, right? I don't think there's any huge issue with it. I think it makes sense for the game, but I also personally feel that this ending is low effort and uninteresting. I do love Kaoru though. I think he's very cute and very sweet. There is kind of this weird thing where like they have a lot of nasty fucking sex, right? Him and Tamamori, because they like live together. Like our Tamamori, like, you know, goes back to the shop with Kaoru and they like live together and they work together and whatever, and we see them like 20 years in the future, or maybe it was now and our Tamamori actually hallucinated being young this whole fucking time and they were actually just working the shop. I don't know. Okay? I don't know. It makes it very unclear. Okay? There's a lot of questions that I have about this fucking ending. But I think it's like a future thing. I think they like go together in the future, but also the Phantom doesn't fucking age. Kaoru doesn't age. Like, he looks the same as he looked when Tamamori was young. So presumably Tamamori was just always old and just hallucinated being young with all his friends. I don't know. Okay? I don't know. Kaoru calls him Oji-san. He calls him dad. But they do have a lot of nasty sex, okay? And it's kind of weird, but it's also like, presumably it was a future Tamamori that raised him. It wasn't our Tamamori. Our Tamamori just had to deal with him after that Tamamori like died. I don't know. He lives in the basement of Umibachiro, right, by the way. And the whole reason why he lives in the basement is because he has a very strong sense of smell, and if he smells Tamamori, he will want to have wild, animalistic, nasty sex with him. So I don't know. That's awesome. That's very cool. Love that. So those are all the routes, right? I think, again, Minakami's is probably the truest. If I had to rank them, I'd probably do Minakami first, then Professor, then Kaoru, then Kawase, then in a millionth place is Hanazawa. I never want to replay Hanazawa's route. I never would. Like, goodbye, Hanazawa. Fuck you. Kill yourself. Some other things about the visual novel. We can talk about the music. Music, I thought, was pretty good. I think it suits the game very well, suits the vibes of the game very well. It's not the best soundtrack of all time, to be clear. I've gone out of my way to listen to it, but I'm also kind of a freak. I think it also definitely takes some time to grow on you. Like, the first time I, like, opened the game, I was like, oh, this music is just okay. Like, this is interesting. But it works very well for the game. It's kind of, like, French-inspired with, like, lots of jazz, tons of percussion, piano, a little bit of what I think is accordion or, like, some harpsichord, and then there's some weird synth stuff, especially in Hanazawa's, like, theme. He's got this, like, really, like, it's like, I don't know what the fuck that is. It feels very suitable for, like, 1920s. And there's kind of, like, this, I wouldn't say like a French theme to the game, but there's this idea that like, one of the songs is called Regarde-moi, which is, you know, French for look at me. And it's like a jazz song. It's the only song that's mentioned in the game, which I think is really interesting because that I think specifically ties into like Tamamori's fears of being like disregarded by like Minakami and his friends, because he is very ultimately afraid of being alone. Overall, I think this was a very successful visual novel. I don't think it's the best one out there. I think a lot of people really, really love it. I was looking at Steam reviews yesterday, just out of like curiosity. I saw one person with 850 hours in the game. It took me 26. And on the like Steam page, they say it's like a 30 to 40 hour playtime. I don't know how much you have to replay that game, or maybe you're just playing whack-a-mole to some of the sex scenes, but like, oh my god. Girl. Anyway. Good for you, though. Good, honestly, whatever. You get your money's worth. I do really like this game. I would give it maybe like 3.5 stars on a scale of 5. I think at times it did get very repetitive. I would say there was like, every hour it would get like repetitive and then really interesting again and then really repetitive. Especially those subsequent routes, Kawase's and Hanazawa's. I fucking said this, I'll say it again. I'd play it again. I'd love to read Minakami's route again. I thought it was very interesting. Yeah. And I think a lot of people enjoy it a lot more than me, so, you know, take whatever I say with a fucking grain of salt. Anyway, I think I did a lot of summarizing this video instead of, like, actually talking about, you know, whatever the fuck, but really, who cares?